Greetings and welcome back to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025, and on Wednesdays we deal with emotional well-being and relationships. Are there people who are intentionally cruel and malicious or seem to thrive on hurting others? Do some people knowingly act in morally reprehensible ways? Are some people what we would simply call evil? Well, as a social scientist, I'm reluctant to use the term evil as an explanation for why people might behave as they do. But it doesn't prevent me from equating the idea of intentionally hurting others with the idea of evil. Again, in a more colloquial or everyday sense of the term. So to be clear here, I'm only going to be talking today about what we might broadly describe as moral evil, or the harm and pain and suffering that human beings intentionally inflict upon one another. I'm not considering the so-called natural evils, the suffering that arises from the natural world, quite independently of direct human action, things like tornadoes or other natural disasters, that sort of thing. So simply put, then, we might first just ask, well, why would people intentionally act in cruel ways to hurt other people? Well, that would require a separate blog altogether. But the reasons they're many. They can include things like genetic or personality disorders, such as borderline personality disorder or psychopathy. Some have been traumatized or abused themselves, which then often can lead to the replication of what they've already experienced. Others have suffered from inadequate socialization, poor parenting, and so forth, such that they end up not really developing that sense of empathy for others. And they don't even necessarily think of themselves as evil. They'll just tend to minimize the damage that's done or justify their actions, including the idea sometimes that they were just following orders or going along with the crowd. And there are actually two quite different forms of evil, in my view, at least from a sociological standpoint. So I'm going to be talking this week only about the first of the two types. So the first one is what I call sadistic evil. This refers to those who act in harmful way towards others in a predatory fashion or purely for personal gain or pleasure. The second type is what I call justificatory evil. Okay? And I'm going to save that for a blog for next week. All right? The companion piece, if you will. All right? So for today's vlog, I'm just going to be looking at sadistic evil. So again, sadistic evil refers to anyone who acts in a predatory fashion, intentionally harms or hurts someone to acquire something for themselves in the form of resources, personal gain, simply personal pleasure. They delight in seeing the suffering of others. And indeed, that's one of the most obvious signs of people behaving in an evil way. All right. So what are the many signs of people who are acting in an evil way? Well, one, of course, would be, and the most obvious, would be direct expressions of cruelty. If someone self-consciously harms others and experiences pleasure directly through the pain and the damage that they inflict upon others, then that's probably almost certainly the most obvious sign or clear indicator that they're prone to evil. A second indicator would be related to power and control dynamics. Those who exercise their power in an effort to express or assert their dominance or impose their will upon others. So again, apart from the obvious physical aspects, relational control can be masked as a form of caring, whereby the person conveys that they're forcing something upon you for your own good. They're demanding certain changes because they'll want to convince you that it's best for you. They'll restrict your personal freedoms, again, as a way of trying to demonstrate that you really need to follow their instructions, follow their lead, because they're just supporting you, and they're going to direct you the right way. A third possible indicator would be if someone's prone to making belittling comments towards you or putting you down through a variety of different forms of ridicule, your appearance or your body, your interest and hobbies, your family and friends, your passions and dreams, and so forth. A fourth indicator would be the apparent absence of empathy. It's that inability, then, to identify the pain and suffering of others, prioritizing instead their own well-being above all else. They essentially relish in the misfortune of others. A fifth possible indicator would be an absence of remorse. If love means never having to say you're sorry, from that old film back in 1970 or something, Ryan O'Neal, then evil means you're never able or willing to say you're sorry. You cannot express remorse because you never feel sorry for anything you've done or for anyone else, no matter how much pain you cause them. So that would be an indicator of evil. Sixth, such people often thrive on chaos, confusion, and conflict. They love to stoke controversy and act in unsettling ways or ways that make you feel unsure of yourself or unsettled or questioning your own reasoning, your own logic, even in the extreme, your own sanity. Think of the term gaslighting in this regard too. Seventh, there's an almost mind-boggling, persistent dishonesty. In other words, those who lie constantly usually do so because they're pursuing some personal ends, power, control, or perhaps evading responsibility. And so they'll change their narratives to suit their needs and often act with incredible defensiveness if they're confronted with their inconsistencies. Eighth, they are often master manipulators. They'll use charm via flattery, they'll feign empathy, or they'll figure out how to push certain buttons to trap you in their webs of deceit. And always with the aspiration, then, of achieving some type of personal gain or profit, typically at your expense. Ninth, and as a related matter, there's often misdirection or fakeness or insincerity in their communications. So most importantly, do their actions reflect their words? You really have to monitor this. A 10th indicator, in the extreme, such individuals may lead a complete second or a double life, if you will, or at least never reveal their true selves so that you don't really know who they are. The 11th issue might be a little bit less concrete, but this is an important one too. They may give off kind of a strange vibe. You have to trust your senses. You can literally feel strange around someone based on the energy that they're giving off. And if you're attuned to yourself, you can even identify disturbances in your own energetic or electromagnetic field. The 12th issue would be their refusal or inability to take responsibility. So instead, they've developed an almost ironclad habit of blaming others or, never taking responsibility themselves for their actions. So they'll blame others, they'll blame circumstances beyond their control, and so forth. But again, as such, then they'll never have to apologize because they didn't do anything wrong. Number 13 involves the extent to which they reveal themselves to be persistently jealous, unable to acknowledge the worth perhaps of others, or unable to enjoy other people's success or good fortune. A 14th issue would be to consider the advice of others. If others warn you about the person, or especially their own friends or family or perhaps coworkers, then that's a sign that you really should take quite seriously. Okay, and then here's number 15. They might be, but by no means are they always, they might be quite bigoted, racist, sexist, homophobic, you name it. If people make claims and blatantly dismiss whole categories of people based on certain, inherent or genetic qualities or what have you, if they make the claims that these kinds of people are inhuman or undesirable, then it's not too much of a stretch to imagine that cruelty might be in their arsenal, that they might be willing to act with cruelty towards these, these others, these undesirables. And finally, and related to the previous point, such people often, kind of in contrast, set themselves and their kind up as inherently superior. They'll often display excessive self-love or admiration, and again, sort of at the expense or by comparison to everyone else. Okay? So these are 16 different signs or indicators that people might be behaving in an evil way. So it's not that humanity's awash with people who display all of these traits. Thankfully, the population research has revealed that it's a relatively small percentage of the population, probably somewhere in the order of around 5%, who display a significant or even a psychodynamically kind of provable sadistic personality, or who are genuinely then evil and cruel towards others in some senses of the term. But instead, what you should be looking for, apart from the obvious, when you do run into such people, but you should look for those who display several of the aforementioned characteristics or tendencies or predispositions. Okay? No one has to display all of these different indicators, or even more than half of them necessarily. It's only those that become regular or recurring themes in their lives, or you'll notice this in your interactions with them. These are the people you should be careful about, that you should avoid getting sort of sucked into their webs of deceit and the dark world of what might quite possibly be an evil person. Okay, so that's it for today. Next week, we're going to evaluate the other category of evil that may not seem entirely obvious at first, and yet often ends up being even more deadly and more cruel in some senses, and that is the notion of moralistic evil. All right, until then, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nourish love in your hearts, and as always, dole out hugs in abundance. And I'll see you soon.